What would you risk to protect the one person you love most? For Mara Williams, the answer was everything. Before you dive into this heart-stopping story, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you breathless. A single mother brought her 11-month-old daughter to the one place children should never be. Italy's most feared mafia boss was about to discover her secret. What happened next would change 3 lives forever. Mara Williams knew she was taking an insane risk. Every morning for the past 2 weeks, she'd hidden Elena in a modified diaper bag, smuggling her infant daughter past security and into Lorenzo De Luca's marble-floored villa outside Milan. The baby usually slept through her shift. Until today. 3:47 p.m. Mara was polishing the grand staircase railing when she heard it. That familiar whimper building in Elena's throat, tucked away in the third-floor linen closet where she'd left her sleeping. Her blood turned to ice. No. Not now. The whimper became a cry. Then a full-throated wail that echoed through the corridor like a siren. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming from the East Wing. Lorenzo De Luca didn't walk through his own home. He prowled it. At 34, he'd built an empire on fear, precision, and the kind of violence that made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit just to avoid his attention. Nobody interrupted his afternoon calls. Ever. Mara's hands trembled as she dropped the polishing cloth. She could run to the closet, grab Elena, and... what? There was nowhere to go. 6 armed guards patrolled the grounds. Every exit required a code she didn't have. Elena's cries intensified. She made it to the closet just as Lorenzo rounded the corner. Their eyes met. His were the color of slate before a storm. Cold, calculating, completely devoid of mercy. Explain. One word. Flat. Final. Behind her, Elena screamed louder, her little face probably turning that deep red that meant she was past soothing. I can't afford childcare. The truth spilled out of Mara before she could stop it. I'm a single mother. My daughter's father walked out when I was 6 months pregnant. I've been bringing her to work because I had no other choice. If I lose this job, we lose everything. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Men who worked for him had been shot for less than this level of deception. He moved past her without a word, opened the closet door, and stared down at the screaming infant surrounded by blankets in a laundry basket. What Mara witnessed next defied everything she knew about the man who'd barely spoken to her in 3 months of employment. Lorenzo bent down and lifted Elena from the basket. The baby's cries had reached a fever pitch. She never calmed down for strangers, always fought and wailed until Mara took her back. But Elena went silent the instant she touched his chest. Her tiny fingers gripped his expensive suit jacket. Those big brown eyes, still wet with tears, locked onto his scarred face. Then she did something that made Mara's breath catch in her throat. Elena smiled. The most dangerous man in northern Italy stood frozen in his own hallway, holding an 11-month-old child who looked at him like he was made of magic instead of murder. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The baby's breathing slowed, synced with his. Her eyelids grew heavy. Within 2 minutes, Elena was asleep against his shoulder. Lorenzo's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had shifted. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Mara couldn't identify. How long have you been doing this? 2 weeks. And you thought you wouldn't get caught? I thought I'd get fired when you found out. She kept her chin up despite the terror crawling up her spine. I still think that. But I needed to try. Lorenzo looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. A child who trusted him completely, who had no idea about the blood on his hands or the empire built on broken bones and worse. You're not fired, he said quietly. Then came the part that would change everything. You're promoted. Mara stared at Lorenzo like he'd just spoken in a language that didn't exist. Promoted? She'd expected handcuffs, maybe a shallow grave in the Tuscan countryside. Not this. I don't understand. Lorenzo carefully transferred Elena back to her arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her small hand clutching at Mara's shirt as she settled against her mother's chest. "You're resourceful," he said, adjusting his cufflinks as if he hadn't just held an infant with the same hands that signed death warrants. "You've been smuggling a child past train security for 2 weeks without detection. That requires intelligence and nerve." He turned toward the staircase, clearly expecting her to follow. "My personal assistant quit yesterday. Too much pressure," she said. "Couldn't handle the lifestyle." There was dark amusement in his voice. "You, on the other hand, brought a baby into a Mafia boss's home because you needed the money. That's the kind of desperate courage I can work with." Mara's mind reeled as she followed him down the marble stairs, Elena warm and heavy in her arms. This had to be a test. Some elaborate setup before the real punishment came. They reached his office, a room she'd only ever cleaned when he wasn't in it. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds, and a desk that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Lorenzo sat in the leather chair behind it, studying her with those unsettling gray eyes. "The position pays triple what you're making now. You'll have an apartment in the East Wing. Private quarters. My chef will prepare your meals. There's a nursery that hasn't been used in 15 years that can be converted for your daughter." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Because I need someone competent who won't betray me." He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. "Your background check came back clean 3 months ago. Single mother, no criminal record, no family ties to rival organizations. You're exactly what I need, someone with everything to lose and nothing to gain by crossing me." That should have terrified her. Instead, exhaustion from 2 weeks of sneaking around, of constantly looking over her shoulder, of surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night made her laugh. Actually laugh. Lorenzo's eyebrow raised slightly. Nobody laughed in his presence unless he'd made a joke, and he never made jokes. "I'm sorry," Mara managed, getting herself under control. "It's just, I've spent 14 days convinced I'd be killed if you found out about Elena. And now you're offering me a raise and an apartment. Life is full of surprises." His tone was dry. "Do you want the job or not?" Elena chose that moment to wake up. Her eyes opened, found Lorenzo across the room, and she made a happy gurgling sound, the one she usually reserved for Mara and absolutely no one else. "She likes you," Mara said softly. "She's terrified of strangers. Always has been. But you, she trusts you." Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition of something he'd lost a long time ago. "Children and animals," he said quietly. "They see things adults don't. Things we train ourselves to ignore." He stood, walked to the window. "I'll have the nursery prepared. You start your new position tomorrow." Dismissed. Mara didn't move. "What if I say no?" Lorenzo turned, and for the first time, she saw something almost like respect in his expression. "Then I'll give you severance pay and a reference letter that will get you work anywhere in Milan." He paused. "But you won't say no. Because you're smart enough to recognize opportunity when it's staring you in the face, even if it comes wrapped in danger." He was right. Damn him, he was absolutely right. "I'll take the job." The East Wing apartment was larger than any place Mara had ever lived. 2 bedrooms, a private bathroom with marble fixtures, and windows that overlooked the villa's garden where armed men pretended to be landscapers. Elena was fascinated by everything. She crawled across plush carpets she'd never be able to afford at home, grabbed at curtains that cost more than Mara's car, babbled at the ornate ceiling molding like it might babble back. "This is temporary," Mara whispered to her daughter, even though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "We're not staying here forever." But 3 days later, she was sitting across from Lorenzo in his private study while he explained exactly what being his personal assistant meant. "You'll manage my schedule. Screen calls. Take notes during meetings." He slid a phone across the desk. Brand new, probably untraceable. "You don't repeat anything you hear. Ever. Not to friends, family, police. Nobody." "I don't have friends anymore," Mara admitted. "Lost them when I got pregnant. Family disowned me for keeping the baby." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "Good. Fewer complications." Over the next week, Mara discovered that Lorenzo's world operated on rules most people never saw. Meetings happened at 2 in the morning. Money moved through channels that didn't officially exist. Men came to the villa looking terrified and left looking relieved, or didn't leave at all. She learned to read his moods by the way he held his coffee cup. Tight grip meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Relaxed hold meant negotiations had gone well. No coffee at all meant blood would be shed before sunrise. Elena, somehow, remained the one constant bright spot in the darkness. Lorenzo started appearing in the nursery around 7 p.m. each evening. Never announced, never explained. He'd just stand in the doorway while Mara fed Elena dinner, watching with an expression that might have been longing on anyone else's face. On the 8th night, Elena saw him and reached out both arms. The universal baby signal for, "Pick me up." Mara froze, spoon halfway to her daughter's mouth. Lorenzo hesitated. Then he crossed the room and lifted Elena from her high chair. The baby immediately grabbed his tie, yanked it sideways, and laughed at his mildly annoyed expression. "She's going to ruin that," Mara warned. "It probably costs more than my car." "It's a tie." Lorenzo gently extracted his silk accessory from Elena's sticky fingers. "I have 73 more." "You counted." "My housekeeper counts. I just pay attention." Elena babbled something that sounded vaguely like "mama," mixed with complete nonsense. Lorenzo listened like she was delivering a keynote speech at the United Nations. "She's trying to tell you about her day," Mara said, fighting a smile. "The high chair, the new toy, the bird she saw through the window. Very important baby business." "I can see that." Lorenzo shifted Elena to his other arm when she started squirming. "How old were you when you had her?" 23. "Young, but not as young as my family acted like I was." Bitterness crept into her voice. "They wanted me to give her up. Said I was throwing my life away for a mistake." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "She's not a mistake. I know that. But try telling that to people who see children as burdens instead of blessings." Mara stood, started cleaning up the dinner mess. Her father agreed with them. Said he wasn't ready to be a dad, that I'd trapped him. Disappeared before she was born. His loss. 2 words. Simple. But the way Lorenzo said them, with absolute certainty, like he was stating a law of physics, made Mara's throat tight. Elena yawned, rubbed her eyes with tiny fists. Her head drooped against Lorenzo's shoulder, seeking that place she'd found the first day. The place where she felt safe. "I should put her to bed," Mara said quietly. But Lorenzo was already walking toward the nursery's converted bedroom. Elena falling asleep against him like this was routine. Like the most dangerous man in Milan had become her daughter's unexpected comfort. Mara followed, watched him lay Elena in the crib with a kind of careful precision he probably used when handling explosives. The baby didn't wake, just curled onto her side with her favorite blanket clutched against her cheek. They stood there in the dim light of the moon lamp, both looking down at the sleeping child who had no idea she'd changed everything. "You're good at this," Mara whispered. Did you have children before?" Lorenzo's face went cold. Shuttered. That fast, the man who just rocked her daughter to sleep vanished behind walls made of steel. "No." One word. Final. End of discussion. He left without another word, and Mara realized she'd just touched something sharp and painful. Something Lorenzo kept buried so deep even his enemies probably didn't know it existed. Mara learned the truth 3 weeks later in Lorenzo's office at 4 a.m. while he made phone calls that would ruin lives by breakfast. She was organizing files, legitimate business on top, actual operations hidden in encrypted folders she pretended not to understand, when she found the photograph. Tucked inside a ledger from 2007. Faded. Creased like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. A young Lorenzo, maybe 19 or 20, smiling. Actually smiling. Holding a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3. Same gray eyes. Same dark hair. Same determined chin. "That's my brother." Mara jumped, nearly dropped the photo. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the pre-dawn shadows. "I'm sorry, I wasn't." His name was Matteo. Lorenzo crossed the room, took the photo from her shaking hands. He'd be 21 now. Studying engineering, maybe. Playing soccer. Arguing with me about everything the way younger brothers do. The past tense hit like a physical blow. What happened? Lorenzo stared at the photo for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat. Detached. The tone of someone reciting facts they'd forced themselves to stop feeling. "I was 22, working my way up in the organization. Making enemies, building power, doing all the things young idiots do when they think they're invincible." He set the photo on the desk. "The Rossi family wanted to send a message. So they took Matteo from our grandmother's house while I was meeting with suppliers in Rome." Mara's stomach turned. "Lorenzo." "They sent him back in pieces. No emotion. Just facts. My grandmother found the first box on her doorstep. Had a heart attack. Died before the ambulance arrived. The other packages came over the next week. Each one with a note that said, 'This is what happens when you challenge the wrong people.'" Silence filled the office. Outside, birds started their morning songs, completely indifferent to the horror being discussed inside. "I killed every single person responsible," Lorenzo continued. "Took me 6 months to track them all down. Some begged. Some fought. Didn't matter. I made sure they understood exactly what they'd taken from me before they died." He finally looked at Mara, and she saw it, the thing he kept buried beneath the expensive suits and calculated violence. Grief. Raw and endless and permanently carved into his soul. "That's when I became what I am now. That's when I stopped being Lorenzo De Luca, big brother and family disappointment, and started being Lorenzo De Luca, the man people cross the street to avoid." Mara understood suddenly why Elena's trust had affected him so deeply. Why he stood in the nursery doorway every evening like he was trying to remember something he'd lost. "How old was he?" she asked quietly. 7. He loved dinosaurs and hated broccoli and wanted to be a race car driver. Lorenzo picked up the photo again. "I was teaching him chess. He was terrible at it, but he tried so hard to beat me. Said one day he'd be smarter than his big brother." He carefully returned the photo to the ledger, closing the book like he was sealing a tomb. "Nobody knows about Matteo except the old guard. I don't talk about him. But you should understand why I responded the way I did when I found Elena in that closet." He met her eyes. Children are sacred. Innocent. They don't deserve to pay for adult wars. Your daughter is safe here because I'll burn this entire city down before I let anyone hurt her. Mara believed him. Completely. Terrifyingly. This wasn't a romantic gesture or empty promise. This was a man stating facts about atrocities he was fully prepared to commit. Thank you, she whispered, because what else could she say? Lorenzo nodded once, then went back to his desk like he hadn't just revealed the wound that had turned him into a monster. But Mara saw it now. The way he touched Elena's hair so gently. The way he listened to her nonsense babbling like it meant something. The way his whole face softened when she reached for him. Lorenzo De Luca wasn't just protecting Elena. He was trying to save the little boy he couldn't protect. 2 months into her new position, Mara attended her first real meeting. Not the polite business negotiations that happened in Lorenzo's office, but the kind that took place in the back room of a closed restaurant in downtown Milan at midnight. "You'll sit behind me," Lorenzo instructed during the drive. "Don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. Take notes on anything that sounds like a threat or a lie. These men are snakes. They'll smile while planning your funeral." The restaurant smelled like old cigarettes and expensive cologne. 5 men waited around a table covered in papers, wine glasses, and what Mara suspected were concealed weapons. Antonio Moretti ran the ports. Fat, sweating, nervous energy radiating off him like heat from asphalt. Giulio Ferrero controlled the construction unions. Thin, cold eyes, fingers stained with what might have been ink or might have been blood. The others she didn't recognize, but they all had the same look. Predators trying to figure out if Lorenzo was a bigger predator or potential prey. "Gentlemen." Lorenzo sat at the head of the table like it was a throne. "Let's discuss your proposal." For the next hour, Mara watched a masterclass in controlled violence that never became physical. Lorenzo let them talk, make their arguments, reveal their desperation. Then he dismantled every point with surgical precision. "You want protection from the Calabrian families moving into your territory," he said finally. "But protection costs. What are you offering in return?" 20% of port revenues," Antonio wheezed. "For 6 months. 40%. For 2 years. That's robbery." Lorenzo smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "No, Antonio. Robbery is what the Calabrians will do when they show up with 50 armed men and take everything. What I'm offering is a bargain." The room went silent. Giulio leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than shouting. "You're squeezing us dry, De Luca. There are other people we could partner with." "Then partner with them." Lorenzo stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Mara, we're leaving." She grabbed her notepad, followed him toward the door. Behind them, chairs scraped. Panicked whispers. "Wait." Antonio's voice cracked. "Wait. 40%. 2 years. We accept." Lorenzo paused, hand on the doorframe. Didn't turn around. "Send the contracts to my office by Friday. If they're late, the price goes up to 50%. In the car afterward, Mara finally spoke. "You were never going to walk away." "No." Lorenzo loosened his tie. "But they needed to believe I would. Fear makes people agreeable. Is that what you want? Everyone afraid of you?" He looked at her with those gray eyes that saw too much. "Fear keeps me alive. Love gets you killed. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way." They drove in silence through Milan's empty streets. Mara thought about the man who'd held Matteo in that photograph, smiling and unguarded. She wondered how much of him was left beneath the armor. When they arrived back at the villa, Elena was awake. The nanny, a sweet older woman named Rosa who'd been with Lorenzo's family for decades, looked frazzled. "She won't stop crying," Rosa said apologetically. "I've tried everything. I think she wants you." But when Mara took her daughter, Elena kept wailing. Red-faced, tears streaming, that particular cry that meant she was working herself into a state no lullaby could fix. Lorenzo stepped forward without being asked. "May I?" Mara handed her over, exhausted and grateful. Elena's cries stopped immediately. She hiccuped, sniffled, then pressed her wet face against Lorenzo's shirt like he was home base in a game of tag. Rosa's eyes widened. "In 30 years working for this family, I've never seen him hold a child." Lorenzo shot her a look that said, "Keep that observation to yourself," but his hands were gentle as he rubbed Elena's back, swaying slightly in that instinctive rocking motion parents develop without realizing. "She missed you," Mara said softly. "Both of you, I think. She always settles better when you're around." Something vulnerable flickered across Lorenzo's face before he could hide it. "I'll stay until she's asleep." He sat in the nursery rocking chair, the one he'd had specially delivered from some designer furniture place in Switzerland, and held Elena while Mara changed into comfortable clothes. When she came back, both Lorenzo and her daughter were still awake. Elena was playing with his watch, fascinated by how it caught the light. "She's going to break that," Mara warned. "Whatever it costs. It's insured." Lorenzo carefully let Elena explore the watch band. "Besides, Matteo destroyed 3 of my father's watches before he turned 5. Apparently it's a family tradition." It was the first time he'd mentioned Matteo without pain lancing through his expression. Progress. Small. Fragile. But real. Spring arrived in Milan, bringing sunshine that made the villa's gardens explode with color. Elena, now 13 months old, had started taking her first wobbly steps. She took her first successful solo walk straight toward Lorenzo. Mara watched from the garden bench, coffee going cold in her hands, as Elena let go of the fountain edge and stumbled forward on unstable legs. 7 steps. 8. 9. Lorenzo was on a phone call, discussing something that probably involved moving money or weapons or both. He looked down just as Elena crashed into his legs, grabbing his pants to stay upright. The person on the phone got put on hold. "Did you just walk?" Lorenzo crouched down to Elena's level. "All by yourself?" Elena giggled, proud of herself, and immediately sat down hard on her diapered bottom. Then she looked up at him with those huge brown eyes and said, clear as a bell, "Enzo." The world stopped. Mara's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattered on the stone patio. Rosa, pruning roses nearby, actually gasped. Even the guards stationed at the garden entrance looked startled. Lorenzo stared at Elena like she'd just spoken ancient Greek. "Did she?" His voice was rough. "Did she just—" "Her first word," Mara whispered, coming closer. "Oh my God, her first word." Elena, delighted by the reaction, clapped her hands. "Enzo! Enzo! Not Mama! Not Dada!" Not any of the words Mara had been trying to teach her for months. Enzo. Her own baby version of Lorenzo. Lorenzo scooped Elena up, and for the first time since Mara had known him, his eyes were wet. Not crying, Lorenzo De Luca didn't cry, but definitely, unmistakably wet. "You're supposed to say, Mama, first," he told Elena seriously. "Your mother carried you for 9 months. She deserves better than second place to a criminal." But he was smiling. Really, genuinely smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. Elena patted his cheeks with both hands. "Enzo." "I'm never going to hear the end of this," Lorenzo muttered, but he held her like she was made of spun glass and stardust. Rosa approached carefully, like she was witnessing something fragile. Your brother's first word was your name too, Signor. Lorenzo. But he couldn't pronounce it, so he called you Enzo until he was almost 4. The smile froze on Lorenzo's face. Mara saw the grief slam back into him, watched him remember that Matteo never got to be 4, never got to pronounce anything correctly ever again. But then Elena said it again, Enzo, and kissed his cheek with her tiny, slobbery baby mouth, and something in Lorenzo's expression shifted. Not the grief disappearing. That never disappeared. But something else joining it. Permission to feel joy alongside the pain. Permission to love this child without betraying the memory of the one he'd lost. I'm going to spoil her, he announced. Completely. Irredeemably. She's going to grow up thinking the world revolves around her. She's 13 months old, Mara protested. You can't. I absolutely can. She'll have everything. The best schools. The best clothes. Protection that would make the president envious. Lorenzo looked at Mara seriously. Your daughter will never know hunger. Never know fear. Never know what it's like to be helpless while bad things happen to good people. He meant it. Every word. This was Lorenzo making a vow. She's not your responsibility, Mara said quietly. You've already done so much. She made me her responsibility the second she said my name first. Lorenzo adjusted Elena in his arms. Besides, I made a decision 3 months ago. I'm just now telling you about it. What decision? He met her eyes. I'm updating my will. If anything happens to me, everything goes to you and Elena. The villa. The legitimate businesses. Enough money to disappear and start over somewhere safe. Mara's knees went weak. Lorenzo. No. I can't accept. You don't have a choice. It's already done. My lawyer has the documents. His voice dropped. I've made enemies, Mara. Dangerous ones. If they come for me, they might come for you too, simply because you're close. This way, you'll have resources. Options. A chance to protect her. Nothing's going to happen to you. But they both knew that was a lie. In Lorenzo's world, violence was currency. Death was business overhead. Every day he woke up was a day someone else wanted him dead. Teach her to be smart, Lorenzo said, watching Elena play with his collar. Teach her to be strong. Teach her that the world isn't fair, but that doesn't mean she should stop fighting for what's right. You could teach her those things yourself. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. But if I can't, I need to know you will. Elena yawned, her brief surge of energy depleted. She tucked herself against Lorenzo's chest, finding that spot that seemed made specifically for her, and closed her eyes. She loves you, Mara whispered. I know. Lorenzo's voice was barely audible. That's what terrifies me. The threats started small. Anonymous notes left at the villa gates. Photographs of Mara and Elena at the park, taken from a distance. Messages sent through intermediaries suggesting that Lorenzo's new family made him vulnerable. He tripled the security. Armed guards now accompanied them everywhere. Mara wasn't allowed to leave the grounds without 2 bodyguards. Elena's stroller had bulletproof panels installed that looked like regular fabric. Who's doing this? Mara demanded after the 5th note arrived, this one explicitly describing how easy it would be to take Elena. Lorenzo's face was granite. The Zanetti family. They've been trying to move into Milan for 2 years. They see Elena as leverage. So give them what they want. I can't. He slammed his fist on the desk, making her jump. If I show weakness now, every family from here to Sicily will think they can extort me by threatening people I care about. It sets a precedent that gets more people killed. So what's your plan? Wait until they actually make a move. My plan is to end them before they get the chance. He pulled up satellite images on his computer. They're operating out of a warehouse in the industrial district. I'm hitting them tomorrow night. 30 men. Full tactical assault. They'll be dust by sunrise. Mara's stomach churned. She'd known what Lorenzo was. Known what he did. But hearing him casually discuss slaughtering 30 people like it was a business merger made it horrifically real. What if you're wrong? What if it's not them? It's them. My intelligence is solid. He closed the laptop. You and Elena are staying here. I'm leaving 10 guards. Rosa will be with you. Lock yourselves in the safe room if anything happens. And if something happens to you? Lorenzo stood, came around the desk, and gripped her shoulders. If I don't come back, you take Elena and run. The emergency protocols are in the safe. Cash, passports, contacts who'll help you disappear. Don't be brave. Don't wait. Just run. That night, Lorenzo came to the nursery later than usual. Elena was already asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with peaceful dreams. He stood by her crib for a long time, just watching her. Mara watched him from the doorway, heartbreaking for reasons she didn't fully understand. I never wanted this, Lorenzo said quietly. When I was young, before Matteo, I thought I'd have a normal life. Wife. Kids. Maybe a little house somewhere quiet. You still could. No. He shook his head. I've done too much. Gone too far. The person I was before doesn't exist anymore. He died with my brother. He reached down, carefully adjusted Elena's blanket. His hand trembled slightly, the only sign of fear Mara had ever seen from him. But I can give her what I lost. Safety. Childhood. The chance to grow up without nightmares. He looked at Mara. That's enough. It has to be. Come back tomorrow, Mara said. Please. She needs you. I'll try. That wasn't good enough, but it was all he could promise. Lorenzo left at 11 p.m. with 25 men, enough firepower to start a small war, and the kind of cold determination that had built his empire. Mara didn't sleep. She sat in the safe room with Elena, Rosa, and the guards, listening to the villa security system ping every 15 minutes with status updates. At 2:47 a.m., the pinging stopped. What does that mean? Mara's voice shook. The head guard, Marco, a 30-year veteran with scars across his knuckles, checked his phone. His face went pale. It means someone cut the main power to the perimeter. Backup generators should have kicked in. They didn't. Rosa crossed herself. Madonna. Lock the door, Marco ordered. Now. The steel door slammed shut just as gunfire erupted outside. Not distant. Close. Too close. Elena woke up crying. Mara clutched her daughter, trying to muffle the screams against her chest while bullets punched through walls above their heads. This was it. The Zanettis hadn't waited for Lorenzo to come to them. They'd come here. To the one place he'd promised was safe. The safe room door had 6 inches of reinforced steel. The walls were concrete fortified with Kevlar panels. They should have been protected. Should have. The door buckled inward after the third explosion. Marco fired through the gap, taking down 2 men before return fire caught him in the throat. He went down gurgling, blood spreading across the floor. Rosa was praying in rapid Italian, clutching her rosary so hard the beads cut into her palms. Mara pressed herself into the corner with Elena, making herself as small as possible, knowing it wouldn't matter. Knowing that if these men got through, no amount of cowering would save them. The door gave way with a scream of tortured metal. 3 men poured through. Armed. Masked. Eyes cold behind tactical gear. The first one pointed his gun at Mara's head. "Where's Lorenzo de Luca?" "Not here," she gasped. "He's not here." "Then you'll do." He reached for Elena. Mara bit him. Actually sank her teeth into his arm like a wild animal, tasting blood and tactical fabric and her own terror. The man backhanded her so hard she saw stars. Elena flew from her arms, hit the wall, started screaming. Then the screaming stopped. Not because Elena was hurt, because a gunshot had just torn through the safe room entrance, taking one of the attackers in the spine. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway like something summoned from hell, covered in blood that wasn't his. Eyes absolutely feral. Gun raised. He shot the second man in the head. Center mass. No hesitation. The third one grabbed Elena off the floor, held her like a shield. One more step and I crush her skull. Time crystallized. Mara could see Lorenzo calculating angles, probabilities, trajectories. Could see him deciding what price he was willing to pay. "You don't want to do that," Lorenzo said. His voice was quiet, reasonable, terrifying. "Put the child down. Walk away. Live to see tomorrow. Drop your gun first." "Not happening." The man's hand tightened on Elena. She whimpered, her tiny face scrunched up in fear and confusion. Lorenzo pulled the trigger. The bullet passed within centimeters of Elena's head, close enough that Mara felt the air displacement from across the room. It punched through the attacker's eye socket, exploding out the back of his skull. The man dropped. Lorenzo caught Elena before she hit the ground. Perfect. Impossible. But perfect. Elena was screaming now, terrified by the noise and blood and violence she was too young to understand but old enough to feel. Lorenzo held her against his chest, his body positioned to shield her from the carnage surrounding them, while his security team swept the rest of the villa. "Clear!" someone shouted from the hallway. "Clear upstairs. All hostiles neutralized. 8 attackers dead. 3 of Lorenzo's men wounded. Marco gone. Rosa traumatized but alive. And Mara, sitting in pooling blood that wasn't hers, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Lorenzo handed Elena to one of his guards, a young man named Dante who looked barely old enough to shave. "Take her to the nursery. Don't leave her side." Then he knelt beside Mara, his blood-soaked hands gentle as he checked her for injuries. The split lip where she'd been hit. Bruises already forming on her arms. But alive. Whole. "You bit him," Lorenzo said, and there might have been approval in his voice. That was either very brave or very stupid. "He was going for Elena." Mara's voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. I couldn't. I know." He helped her stand, kept his arm around her when her legs threatened to give out. "You did exactly right. You fought for her." They made it to the nursery where Elena was still crying, reaching for them both with desperate hands. Lorenzo took her back, and immediately she calmed to hiccuping sobs. "How did you know?" Mara asked. "You were supposed to be at the warehouse. It was a trap. Empty building, cameras everywhere, tripwires that would have killed half my team." Lorenzo's jaw was tight. "Someone inside my organization sold me out. Told the Zanettis my plans. They hit the villa while they thought I'd be occupied dying in an explosion. But you figured it out. 20 minutes before we would have walked into it. Turned around, drove like hell to get back here. His hands shook slightly where they held Elena. 5 more minutes and I would have been too late. The implications of that crashed through Mara like a second wave of adrenaline. 5 minutes. The difference between rescue and devastation. Between Elena alive and Elena. She couldn't finish that thought. The traitor, she managed. Do you know who? Not yet. But I will. His voice dropped to something sub-zero. And when I find them, they'll beg for the mercy I gave those men downstairs. They won't receive it. Rosa appeared in the doorway, rosary still clutched in her white-knuckled hands. The master suite is clean. I've already changed the sheets. You should all rest. But none of them rested that night. Lorenzo sat in the rocking chair with Elena, refusing to put her down even after she finally fell asleep from exhaustion. Mara curled up on the nursery floor with a blanket, unwilling to leave them. Rosa dozed in the corner, startling awake at every small sound. As dawn light started filtering through the curtains, Elena stirred. Her eyes opened, found Lorenzo's face above her. She reached up with one small hand and patted his cheek. Then she touched the cut on his forehead, a graze from debris where he'd blown through a wall to reach the safe room faster. Her fingers came away with a tiny smear of blood. Elena looked at the blood on her hand, looked at Lorenzo's face, and even though she was barely over a year old, something like understanding passed through her expression. "Enzo hurt," she said softly. Those 2 words broke something in him. Lorenzo's face crumpled. Just for a second, one brief, unguarded second where all his armor failed and the raw, bleeding grief underneath showed through. Then he pulled himself together, but Mara had seen it. The exact moment Elena's innocence and concern cracked through walls that violence and loss had spent years building. "I'm okay," he told her, voice rough. "Enzo's okay. You're safe now." Elena leaned forward and kissed his forehead, right over the cut. The way Mara had kissed her scrapes and bruises 100 times. The universal language of childhood comfort. "Better," Elena announced with satisfaction. Lorenzo looked at Mara over their daughter's head. Their daughter. When had she started thinking of them that way? When had Elena become theirs instead of just hers? "She's resilient," Mara whispered. "Like her mother." "Like both her parents," Lorenzo corrected. Then, quieter, "I could have lost you both. If I'd been 5 minutes later. But you weren't." Mara stood, crossed to the rocking chair, and did something she'd never dared before. She put her hand on Lorenzo's shoulder. "You came back. You saved us. That's what matters." His free hand came up, covered hers, held on like she was an anchor in a storm he'd been navigating alone for too long. They stayed like that while sunrise painted the nursery in shades of gold and pink. 3 people who'd become a family in the most unlikely, dangerous, impossible way. And in that moment, with Elena safe between them and death still fresh in their memories, something shifted. Some unspoken acknowledgement that what existed between them was no longer just employer and employee, protector and protected. This was something deeper, fiercer, more terrifying than any bullet or bomb. This was love, growing in soil fertilized by trauma and watered with blood. And neither of them knew if that was redemption or damnation. The investigation into the betrayal took 3 days. Lorenzo barely slept, barely ate, moving through the villa like a ghost with unfinished business. On the 3rd day, he called Mara into his office. It was Giulio Ferrero. He slid a folder across the desk. Evidence. Bank transfers. Recorded phone calls. Proof of months of collaboration with the Zanetti family. The construction unions were a front. He's been moving weapons and drugs through building sites for 2 years. Mara looked at the papers without really seeing them. The man from the restaurant meeting. Yes. Cold eyes. Steady hands. I should have known. Lorenzo's expression was carved from ice. He sold out my location, my schedules, my security protocols. All for 20 million euros and a promise of territory in the north. What are you going to do? Lorenzo's smile was a terrible thing. What I do to everyone who threatens my family. I'm going to erase him from existence. Lorenzo. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't ask me to show mercy. Not for this. Not for someone who would have let Elena die. He was right. Mara knew he was right. But hearing him say it so calmly, like he was discussing removing a stain from carpet, made her remember exactly what kind of man Lorenzo was beneath the gentleness he showed their daughter. I'm taking you with me, Lorenzo said. Mara's head snapped up. What? Tonight. The meeting. You're coming. He stood, began pacing. You need to understand my world completely if you're going to survive in it. No more pretending you don't see the violence. No more conveniently stepping out when business gets bloody. You need to see what I am when there's no child in the room softening my edges. Why? Because one day I might not come home. And when that happens, you need to be hard enough to do what's necessary to protect Elena. He stopped pacing, faced her directly. I'm not asking. This is part of your job now. Part of living under my protection. You witness. You learn. You understand exactly what price gets paid for the safety you've been enjoying. That night, Mara wore a black dress that Lorenzo had delivered to her room. Expensive. Elegant. The kind of outfit that said, I belong in this world of monsters. She felt like she was wearing a costume in a play she didn't audition for. They drove to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Milan. 20 of Lorenzo's men were already there, surrounding a figure tied to a chair in the center of the empty space. Giulio Ferrero looked smaller than Mara remembered. Bloodied. One eye swollen shut. Shaking despite his best efforts to appear defiant. Lorenzo approached him slowly, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. A lion circling prey. You sold me out for money, Lorenzo said conversationally. I respect that, in a way. Money is honest. Direct. Not like loyalty or honor or any of those other abstractions people pretend matter. You would have done the same, Giulio spat blood onto the concrete. Don't pretend you're better than me. I'm not better than you. Lorenzo crouched down to Giulio's eye level. I'm worse. I'm so much worse that I'm going to explain exactly what happens next, and you're going to wish you'd never been born. What followed made Mara turn away 3 times. She forced herself to look back each time, knowing Lorenzo wanted her to see this. Needed her to understand that the man who rocked Elena to sleep was the same man capable of this level of calculated cruelty. Giulio screamed for mercy. Screamed for death. Eventually just screamed. Lorenzo never raised his voice. Never lost control. He worked with the precision of a surgeon and the cold efficiency of an executioner. When it was over, when Giulio's body was just meat and bones that used to be a person, Lorenzo turned to his men. Deliver him to the Zanetti family. Include a note that says, this is what happens to traitors. You're next. Then he walked to where Mara stood against the wall, fighting nausea and tears and the overwhelming urge to run. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. But I'm not sorry I did it. I know. Do you hate me now? Mara looked at this man who just committed atrocities, who had blood literally on his hands, who was waiting for her judgment with something that might have been vulnerability in his eyes. No, she whispered. I should. But no. Why not? Because I keep seeing Elena touching your face. Saying, Enzo hurt. Caring about you in the way only children can care, completely, without conditions. She took a shaky breath. Whatever else you are, whatever you do out here in this world, you're different with her. You're real with her. And I think maybe that's the person you wish you could be all the time. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. That person is dead. Is he? Because I just watched you avenge an attack on a child. Not for business. Not for reputation. For her. Because someone threatened her and you couldn't let that stand. That's not nobility. That's possession. She's mine to protect, and anyone who challenges that gets destroyed. Call it whatever you want. Mara stepped closer, close enough to smell the copper tang of blood on his clothes. But Elena sees the truth. And so do I. You're not just a monster, Lorenzo. You're a man trying to protect the only good thing left in his life. They stood there in that factory full of death and darkness, two people who'd crossed lines they could never uncross, bound together by a child who'd rewritten both their stories. We should get home, Lorenzo said finally. Elena will be waking up soon. And just like that, they stepped back into the other world, the one with nursery rhymes and baby laughter and goodnight kisses. The world where monsters could pretend to be men. 3 months passed. The Zanetti family was systematically dismantled, assets seized, leadership arrested or disappeared, their territory absorbed into Lorenzo's empire. Other families took note. The message was clear. Lorenzo da Luca's protection extended to his household, and violating that protection meant extinction. Elena turned 15 months old and started stringing words together. Enzo up. Mama juice. Rosa cookie. She ruled the villa like a tiny, curly-haired dictator, and every hardened criminal who worked for Lorenzo treated her like she was made of porcelain and starlight. Mara found herself settling into a life she'd never imagined. She managed Lorenzo's legitimate business operations, learning the empire's legal face while knowing exactly what darkness funded it. She attended meetings where decisions were made with handshakes and signatures instead of bullets and blood. But the biggest change was in Lorenzo himself. He started coming home earlier, cancelled late-night meetings that weren't urgent, spent evenings in the nursery reading to Elena from picture books about animals and adventures, his deep voice turning gentle as he explained why elephants had trunks and why the moon changed shape. One night, Mara found him teaching Elena to dance. Well, teaching was generous. Mainly he was holding her little hands while she stomped her feet to music from his phone, giggling every time he spun her in a circle. "You're good at this," Mara said from the doorway. Lorenzo looked up, and there was something unguarded in his expression. Matteo loved dancing. Used to make my mother put on music after dinner, insisted on being her partner. He'd step on her toes and apologize like a little gentleman. He'd been talking about Matteo more lately. Small stories that emerged like flowers through concrete. Memories that didn't destroy him to share anymore. "Elena's lucky to have you," Mara said quietly. "I'm lucky to have her. Both of you." Lorenzo set Elena down when the song ended. She immediately toddled over to her toy box, chattering to herself. "You know what she asked me today?" "What?" "If I was her papa." His voice cracked slightly on the word. Rosa was reading her a book about families, showing her the pictures. Mother, father, child. Elena pointed at the father and said, "Enzo papa?" Mara's heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "I said yes." Lorenzo met her eyes. "Was that wrong? Should I have explained that biology doesn't match paperwork, that her real father abandoned her, that I'm just the criminal who happened to?" "No." Mara crossed the room, took his hands. "You're her papa in every way that matters. You protect her. Love her. Show up for her. That's what fathers do." I'm not a good man, Mara. I've done terrible things. I'll do more terrible things. She deserves better. She deserves you. The real you. The man who drops everything when she cries. Who reads the same book 17 times because she loves the pictures. Who would burn the world down to keep her safe. Mara squeezed his hands. You're not your past, Lorenzo. You're what you choose to be in this moment. Lorenzo pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. They'd touched before, professional contact, necessity, the brief intimacy of shared trauma. But this was different. This was intentional. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. The family thing. The domestic thing. I'm going to mess it up. Welcome to parenthood. We're all making it up as we go. Elena toddled back over, clutching a stuffed elephant. She pushed it against Lorenzo's leg insistently. Enzo. Elephant dance. The elephant wants to dance now? Lorenzo picked her up, tucked her against his side. All right. But only 2 more songs. Then it's bedtime. 3 songs. 2. 4 songs. Nice try. Still 2. Mara watched them negotiate, watched Lorenzo pretend to consider Elena's increasingly ridiculous counteroffers, 9 songs and cookies, and felt something fierce and tender bloom in her chest. This was her family. Unconventional, dangerous, built on foundations that would horrify normal people. But hers. Later, after Elena was asleep and the villa had settled into its nighttime quiet, Lorenzo found Mara in the kitchen making tea. I need to tell you something, he said. His tone made her stomach drop. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. But you need to know. He paused, choosing words carefully. I've fallen in love with your daughter. Completely. Irreversibly. If something happens to me, if the organization fractures or if rivals come calling, I've ensured she's protected. Financial trusts, legal guardianships, safe houses across 3 continents. She'll want for nothing. Lorenzo. I've also fallen in love with you. The words came out quiet, almost clinical, like he was presenting evidence in court. I didn't plan it. Didn't want it. Love is a liability in my world. But I wake up thinking about you. Fall asleep remembering how you look when you laugh. Watch you with Elena and feel things I thought died with Matteo. Mara's teacup trembled in her hands. You don't have to. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. He stepped closer. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The possibility that I might be more than the worst things I've done. And whether or not you feel the same, I need you to know that protecting you both isn't obligation or strategy. It's love. I do feel the same, Mara whispered. I've been trying not to. You're dangerous and violent and everything I should run from. But then I see you with Elena, and I see who you really are beneath all the armor. And yes, I love you. Terrifyingly. Completely. Lorenzo kissed her then. Gentle at first, then deeper, both of them pouring months of restraint and fear and need into that contact. When they finally pulled apart, both were shaking. This is insane, Mara breathed. Absolutely. Lorenzo tucked her hair behind her ear. But I've built an empire on insane decisions. One more won't hurt. What do we tell Elena? The truth. That monsters can learn to be men. That families come in all forms. That love doesn't erase the past, but it can write a different future. Upstairs, Elena slept peacefully in her crib, unaware that the 2 people who loved her most had finally admitted what they'd both known for months. That this broken, bloody, impossible family was exactly what they all needed. And sometimes, redemption looks like a crying baby in a mafia boss's arms. Sometimes, love grows in the darkest places. Sometimes, the most dangerous man in Milan becomes someone's hero just by showing up when it matters. And as Elena's tiny breath steadied against the chest of the man the world feared most, Mara realized nothing would ever be the same again. Their lives had collided in ways none of them could escape. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because the choices they make next will decide everything.